I'm Tom, and everybody knows me as the new newsletter editor and the past president of Cornish American Heritage Society. And I'd like to welcome Mark Connor. He's talked to us before, and I believe most of his description today will be not only about the President pumping engine, but the dedication, the big celebration that they had. I guess it was in November, and how
Yes.
that all came about. And so I will just let you go for it.
Okay. Sounds good, Tom. Let me see if I can share my screen and hopefully if everything goes well, you can see my screen, right?
Yes,
Okay.
excellent.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, great. Well, let me get rolling here. Yes, Tom, I would like to talk about give an update on the President engine. I thought first what might be good though is just because it's been a long time since we've talked about the mine overall. So I'd like to do that. I'm going to talk about the mine and the engine, which of course is a big is the landmark, if you will, of that mine. But I think it's also given this given the group that we have assembled here, it's I think it'd be important just to talk also a little bit about the mine and the Cornish heritage that's associated with it because it's pretty deep. So let's see. We talked back in November 17. Myself, Damian Nance, were at the 18th gathering and talked first about the President engine. And then we've given various updates throughout the years. And we appreciate that very much. The publicity is always helpful and has been helpful to us. So let me just give a little bit of background on the mining itself in Friedensville. As you can see from this photograph, the one on the left is a stereo view showing the mine in the 19th century, and the one on the right obviously is newer than that. That's from the 1950s, and the mines actually had two histories. It had a 19th century history and a 20th, and the Cornish influence was mostly focused on the 19th century mine. So how this all started, the Friedensville mines in the 19th century operated from 1853 to 1893. And they were really the first exploitation of zinc in America. It is a birthplace of the U.S. zinc industry. Unlike people, the industry can have two birthplaces or maybe more. In this case, Friedensville, which is just south of Bethlehem, and just because I know we got a little bit of a spread out geography here, Bethlehem is roughly 50 miles north of Philadelphia and 70 miles west of New York City. And so the mines here, along with mines that were located in northwest New Jersey, a place called Franklinville, were really the first places that zinc was really exploited in America. So I'll talk about that in a little more detail. But in Friedensville, we actually had five mines in the 19th century. The largest was called the Uberoth mine, but there were also four others, smaller mines, all of which were, for the most part, operated by one company. So in 1845, this house and has a massive sycamore tree in front of it, still does. This is a fairly current picture. The sycamore tree is actually the third largest tree in diameter in Pennsylvania. So it's a big fellow. And this was the farmhouse of Jacob Uberoth. And Uberoth had these rocks on his field. His fields weren't very fertile. And he had these rocks, and when he tried to, the country rock here is limestone, and when he tried to burn it in his kilns, it didn't burn properly. He got these strange rocks. He didn't know what to do with it. But in 1845, a fellow by the name of Roper, who was a local, he actually ran the Bethlehem was a community run by the Moravians. It was a closed community, and Roper was the administrator of that community. He was one of these guys who could do a little bit of everything. He was a musician, he was a choir master, he was a teacher, he was a metallurgist, he was a chemist, very versatile individual. And he was walking around near Uberoth's farm and he saw a flower that looked odd and he thought that there might be a different type of mineral there. So he asked for samples from Uberoth. And Uberoth was desperate to figure out what these minerals were because he was pretty well mortgaged to the hilt and really needed to make some money. So he said, "Yeah, well, please, if you can tell me what it is, that's great." So Roper took them back to Bethlehem. Bethlehem's about 4 miles from where the mine is, and he took it to a foundry which basically had a business of making trombones for the local Moravian choir. And but they had a little foundry there, and they took these oxidized ore rocks and combined it um, with copper, and through that process they realized that what they had, because what it did when they took the copper and the oxidized ores and put them together, they ended up with um, with brass, and they knew then that the oxidized ores were zinc. So this was good. So they knew they had zinc now, zinc ore, and that started a whole process of prospecting by not just Roper's team but others. And Roper, but the problem was at that time is that there really wasn't a U.S. process to refine zinc from zinc ore. It could be done in Europe, and paint manufacturers particularly were interested in getting a zinc powder, which they or zinc oxide. They called it white zinc. All of it came from Europe. It was fairly expensive, but it was far superior to lead as a product to make paint because when you added the zinc in, the paint was whiter, it spread better, it was more durable. All the characteristics were superior. So they were, there's a lot of business incentive, if you will, to come up with a U.S. process to take zinc ore and create zinc oxide directly from it. But there wasn't a process at the time. Roper went into business with a guy named Earp, a Philadelphia merchant. They ended up sending samples to Europe to see if they could get it refined there, and they weren't able to do anything with it. So it carried on that way for about 4 or 5 years. And then in 1850, a fellow by the name of Samuel Wetherell, who was a member of a well-known Quaker Philadelphia family, very wealthy family. Family's still wealthy today. His great grandson is the founder of Wawa Food Chains, which some of you will know. So it was a family that was, as I said, quite successful. Samuel was an inventor, chemist. He was working in a laboratory in Newark, and he was using those ores I mentioned from Northwest New Jersey. And he was able to, with a new process that he came up with, he was able to take those ores and turn them into zinc oxide directly. But the problem was that it wasn't a very good product, and he couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted to buy it, so they said, "Well, we'll make our own paint out of it." But then nobody wanted the paint, so it wasn't going very well. This guy Earp came to, went to Samuel Wetherell in Newark and said, "Why don't you try the ores from Friedensville?" Which he did. He tried those ores in his process, and it created a superior product, one that was comparable to the European one. And so he went back to his employer, which at the time his company was a predecessor company to what later became New Jersey Zinc. He went back to them and said, I got this process. I have this ore source, which he was smart enough to get it in his name, not his company's name. He says, let's do a deal here. They couldn't come to terms. So he left. He just walked out the door, went to Bethlehem, which, as I said, is only 4 miles from where these mines are, built a plant in Bethlehem, and then started to operate the mines. And so there's a little hill in between Bethlehem and Friedensville, and they would start mining the ore in Friedensville, take it over the hill, and start out on mule trains. And as the roads got better, it was mule carts, and to this plant where they refined the zinc oxide in South Bethlehem. So that started in roughly 1853 is when that started. Now Wetherell was a really smart chemist, inventor, creative guy. Wasn't the world's best businessman. In addition to building the plant on the south side of Bethlehem, he decided he'd install a racetrack, and they were running horse races at lunchtime, and the workers loved him, but it did take away from productivity, if you will. And down at the mines, he bought a tavern across the street from the mines, and then he dug a tunnel between the mines and the tavern so you could quickly get out of the mines and up the steps to the bar. So he was kind of a he was not your typical Quaker guy. He was more of a party animal, and this went on for a little bit. And in the following year, in 1854, the plant burned down. And this is a picture of the plant on fire in Bethlehem, South Bethlehem, which at the time was largely agricultural. Plant burned down. With this, the Quaker investors in the company, from mostly Philadelphia investors, some New Yorkers, but mostly Philadelphia, said we need to make a change. So they pushed Wetherell aside, brought in a guy named Joseph Wharton, who that may be a familiar name, Wharton School of Business. He founded, as well as Swarthmore College was also, he founded that. He was one of the founders of that, and became one of the most wealthiest industrialists by the end of the 19th century. But this was his first venture. He was only in his late 20s, but they thought Joseph Wharton was the guy to run this business and turn it around, which he did. He got made the zinc oxide business profitable, added a rolling mill to create zinc sheets as well as metallic zinc in ingot form. The Civil War came along and they started to make lots and lots of money. But they were also running into a problem, which is water. As they started to bring the mines down to 50 feet and below 50 feet, they were getting huge quantities of water intrusion into the mines. They came up with various different types of pumps. I think at one point they had about 4 or 5 different pumps running, trying to clear the mines of water. But it became clear by the late 1860s that they needed something more substantial if they're really going to be able to keep the mines open. And that's when the famous President pumping engine was inaugurated, 1868, and it was started up in 1872. Now it ran for 4 years, ran continuously for 4 years, really almost without a hitch. But the mine still closed at the end of 1876 for various reasons. One was economic. There was a general downturn in the economy at that point. Zinc was a commodity, and they had a patent. Wetherell's patent had expired at that point, so other people could use it. And they were also finding other sources of zinc. Some of them out your way. They're in Missouri and Tennessee were some other locations. I think even maybe Wisconsin, where they were finding other mines and starting to exploit zinc elsewhere. So that ended up with shutting the mines for a period. They reopened again, however, in 1881. And this was now under the control of a New York investor by the name of Franklin Osgood. His main interest in life was yacht racing. He was a rear admiral of the New York Yacht Club. He actually is most famous for his ship, the Magic, which was the first defender of the America Cup race. The famous yachting race that I think is the longest sporting event in history. It started in 1851. In 1870 was the first challenge, and America won that, kept the cup. So that's his main claim to fame, but he also was a big investor in silver, lead, zinc mines, particularly in the East. So he was operating the Friedensville zinc mine from 1881 until they finally closed in 1893. By that time, Osgood had passed away, so had his brother, who was also heavily involved in the business. There was again another financial turndown. So the mines closed at that point. New Jersey Zinc Company ended up buying the mines in 1899. But when they bought it, they really didn't have any intention of mining. They just didn't want anybody else to mine it. So there was really a case they were just kind of holding the ore in reserve. The big President engine was scrapped in 1900. Became the USS Maine, which was the battleship that replaced the battleship that sank at Havana Harbor and was been attributed to the start of the Spanish-American War. So that was So that really is a very quick history of the 19th century mine.
I have a question.
Yes,
Um, so it's the way it's been just described. It's like, yeah, they made this engine, but you stated it in your article that it's the largest and most powerful cylinder stationary steam engine ever constructed. What kind
yes.
of engineering crew were they Cornish, or do you know anything about how they designed it and made it?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And
Okay,
yeah, this was I just thought I'd maybe give a little bit of background on the mine itself. And so when it closed in 1890, like I said, 1899, uh, when they started off the pumps, actually the President engine actually shut down about 1892, because they had a technical failure. One of the walking beams cracked, and they couldn't. The mining company was in poor financial condition, and they didn't have the technical resources either. They tried a couple other methods to get the mine clear of water. Nothing worked, so they really had to shut the mine. Um, so it became the way I like to think about it. The mine was a mine for about 40 years, and now it's been about 100 years as a swimming hole. And these are different pictures. From the top left. You can see that's obviously from the 1890s when the engine was still intact. But after the mines closed, within 2 years the water filled back up. From a depth perspective, the mine was about 250 feet deep, open pit mine. In about 2 years, the water table restored to pretty much what level you would see today. And you can see that picture, 1890s. The next black and white picture going clockwise is from the 1930s. You can see the engine house ruins there and the water in the mine, largely still unvegetated. And now you can see at the bottom two pictures, which are current, the mine, both in a winter condition as well as a summer. You can see we now have trees and growth, and the ruins are still there, although they lost their chimneys in 1950. They were deemed to be unsafe, and the brick chimneys were taken down. So it was, as I said, a swimming hole for a long time, very popular one locally. You might recognize let's see how anybody who is that person?
Amelia Earhart.
There we go. Yes, she's the most famous person to swim in this mine. In 1920, she spent the summer in Bethlehem with her BFF, and they spent every day at the not every day, but they spent a lot of time at the mine swimming. That's one of the things she noted in her late about 10 years later when she returned to Bethlehem, how much fun she had swimming in the mine. So I like to say she's the most famous person to swim in the mine, but many others that I can, when I give this talk here locally, I oftentimes run into somebody who says, well, not so much anymore. I swam there, but my dad was there, and so forth. So it became quite famous. And even today, we had Lehigh University that owns the property has to often chase kids out of the mine. It's still a pretty popular swimming hole. So mines reopened in the 1958 and operated until 1983. This time it was New Jersey Zinc Company that was running them. It's all underground, about 2,000 feet down. So this was entirely an underground operation. Heavy equipment used, of course, to do that. After what happened, the mine shut in 1983. It was the last metallic ore mine in Pennsylvania. It was bought by a property developer, and now the property around where the President engine is located is largely developed. There's a shopping mall, office center, residential units. It was developed, has been developed since that time in that manner, kind of a multi-purpose development. Pretty nice, very nice actually. And what happened was the developer died in 1997. He was a very loyal Lehigh University alum. And when his wife passed away a number of years later, the estate said, what are we going to do with this property? And they said, well, we think Don would probably want to turn it over to Lehigh. So Lehigh received 755 undeveloped acres from the estate in 2012. Some of it's very good property for development. Other parts of it are mine tailings and so forth, which are less developable, right? So the big issue with this mine, as I've started to allude to with water, it has been called the wettest mine in America. I think uh, some have even said it's the wettest mine in the world. These two photographs are from the 20th century when they were mining. You can see some of the water flow. The normal water flow that they had in the 20th century in the mines was about 30,000 gallons per minute. So they actually had four different levels of pumps, uh, about 40 pumps altogether at four different levels to get the water out of the mine. Uh, in the 19th century, when they were mining, it was more like 15,000 gallons per minute, but still a lot of mine. So much so that you can see this quote here. To put the matter another way, the water flowing into the shaft would fill to a depth of 27 feet in 15 minutes. So the water, it really took an extraordinary tool to be able to remove the water from this mine. So now here, you guys will have the answer to this question. In the 1860s, and you were the board of directors sitting around the table, and you had a mining problem, who would you call? Would you You'd
Someone,
call the Cornish guy, right?
yeah, yep.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, who would have the experience? You'd look to a Cornish mining engineer. Cornwall, as we know, mined and processed half the world's production of copper and tin in the mid 19th century. And as part of that, because of the importance of dewatering mines, when steam technology came along, Cornwall was a very early adopter of steam technology. Many of the famous inventors involved in steam technology, not all of them came from Cornwall or Devon. Newcomen was from Devon. Trevithick obviously was Cornish. Wolfe, Cornish. Many of the famous inventors of steam technology and people who improved it were from Cornwall. And that's what the mining company did. They not only they called a Cornish guy, but they already knew a lot of Cornish guys. All the mine in the 19th century, all the mine captains in the Friedensville mines were from Cornwall. As I mentioned, the machinery engineers and the operators were from Cornwall. Not only the guy who designed the engine, but the people who operated it were from Cornwall. The miners, for the most part, were Cornish, Devon, and then Ireland. Quite a few of the miners were from Ireland. I think it's pretty safe to say that the Cornish generally tended to be the higher skilled, higher paid positions. The Irish got more of the quote unquote grunt work out of it. I don't know how they got along. We only have one story to tell where the mine captain, sometime in the late 1860s, didn't think it was too important to give the miners off for St. Patrick's Day.
Oh.
That resulted in a fist fight in the center of town. They did have these little tiffs, but overall it looks like it was reasonably. They managed to find a way to work together. The fellow who built this pump was named John West. He was from Cornwall. He was born in Crowan, near Camborne, right? Died in Reading, Pennsylvania, 70 years old. Immigrated to the United States in 1849. Like many Cornish engineers, his father was a mechanical engineer. He had a famous uncle who was a mechanical engineer. So he came from an engineering family. And he had other landmarks here in the States in terms of engine design. He designed the first Cornish engine ever manufactured in the United States. And he designed and manufactured the first Cornish engine ever exported from the United States. That one went to Mexico. And he erected the last Cornish engine that was operated in the United States. It operated up until the 1920s. So he also spent some time working on the Comstock lode and other mining locations in the Midwest and West. He did a little bit of work in Michigan. So he had a long resume, and but certainly the President pumping engine was a landmark one. That's the one that made his obit. That was the big commanding project that he had. It is the largest single cylinder stationary steam engine that was ever made. It had two lattice work beams that were 36 foot end to end. You can see them here. These are the beams right there. The cylinder is 110 is 10 inches in diameter. So, think about a cylinder that's over 9 feet in diameter in terms of the engine. The 10-foot stroke on the piston, and these flywheels there's two of them. They're each 30 foot in diameter. So, very huge engine, created about 3,000 horsepower, was capable of pulling up to 17,000 gallons a minute of water from the mine. And it was to operate it, it required 20 steam boilers. So in the front of this engine house was a big boiler house that had 20 steam boilers in it. Some of those were 30 feet long, so it was a massive undertaking. So just to get a sense of the size of the engine, one of the things they used to say about the engine back in the 19th century when they talked about it, they said it had the biggest nut in the world. Now, my wife tells me I'm the biggest nut in the world. But anyway, this nut was supposedly which tied the crossbar of the engine over the piston rod. It was 1,600 pounds, and supposedly it required a wrench that was 20 feet long and 20 workmen to either loosen or tighten the wrench, tighten the nut. So that was one of the things that when they wanted to explain how big this thing is, that's one of the things they mentioned. So just a little bit of social history. There's a little village that's just oh, I don't know, a quarter of a mile north of Friedensville. It's called Colesville. It's largely disappeared today. But in the 1860s, the area around Colesville looked like this. By 1870, when the mine was in full-blown operation, the area looked like this. And these were all miner homes that kind of, double typical miner homes like this or like this. And there was a Methodist chapel right in the center of all of it, right there. You can see a picture of it. And that later became a Catholic chapel, but it was originally a Methodist chapel. Of course, we had a lot of Irish miners too, and there was the Colesville Tavern, which was also there. And this was really a center of a community, and it's very interesting. I think both Cornish and Irish miners were living together pretty much side by side in this community. Nothing's really left of it today. The only thing that remains is a small cemetery, and that it's overgrown. It's actually inaccessible because it's really effectively in the guy's backyard. But we were able to get into there. Myself and Mike Cos were able to get into the cemetery, and the stones are all broken or down. The church, the Catholic Church, owns the cemetery, and they have no interest in maintaining it. But we were able to get in and record all the stones and actually do, what you can do with Ancestry, as you guys know, is amazing. So we've done a lot of work. We've been able to identify all the people in there. We put a site on Find a Grave, and we've even traced some of the genealogy. So it was interesting. All of them are from Cornwall or Devon. And as I said, we've been able to trace the history of all the folks in there. This is an example of one of them, Samuel Adams. He fell 90 feet down a shaft at the mine, and that's how he passed. But what's interesting is he was married to Susan, and she was a bow maiden. And we can see on the census certificates for census records from 1870 that there were women miners in Friedensville. So some of that bow maiden tradition from Cornwall extended over here to the Friedensville mines. I like this photo. We think I've shared this with Ron. You guys know Ron James, right? I've
Yeah,
I've shared,
yeah,
the folklore guy. I've shared this with Ron James. He and I agree. This could be the only known photograph of a Tommyknocker. We're not sure, but you can pretty much see through this guy. And we found this on a glass plate, and when they made the photograph, this is what came out. It's from the Friedensville mines, one of the uh, one of the veins or mine shafts that go into the mine. It's from the 18 I think early 1890s, we believe, late 1880s perhaps. But that's we're not sure, but we think it could be the only photograph of a Tommyknocker. So there you go. Can't prove it, but sure looks like it, right?
right.
So what's next at Friedensville? Will question is, will it join the landmarks with other places? The point I try to make to groups when I talk to them is this: when you look at Cornwall, the real landmark structure of the UNESCO World Heritage um, landscape is the engine house, right? And we've all seen this photo on the right of Cornwall Engine House. Elsewhere in the world, Australia, Mexico, in particular, but other places have either restored their engine houses or they have at least stabilized the ruins and have made them into heritage museums or heritage places, recognizing their mining history. I picked a particularly bad looking picture of our engine house. Now, we've actually cleaned it up quite a bit, but still, the point is that this is could be a real extension of a UNESCO World Heritage Site if we can actually pull together the resources to stabilize the ruins and get it so that it's publicly accessible. So, and that's one of the points I make locally to people is that from a local perspective, this is the earliest modern industry in the Lehigh Valley. It really predates the steel industry, which Bethlehem is known for. The engine house is really part of an engine because it's a house-built engine. So in fact, the house was necessary for the engine to be supported, and it was a landmark engine. So and so with that, we think there's really a very strong reason why we should not only just remember it but restore and preserve it. It is the only surviving example of a Cornish-style pumping engine house in the United States. We do know there were others. Most of it centered in southeastern Pennsylvania, where the Cornish first mined in the 1840s. They came in the 1840s, and there were copper mines there. And we know that there were copper and nickel mines, and we know we have photographic evidence that there were other Cornish engine houses, but they're all gone. The only one that survives is the president. And the other reason I think it's important is that if you're thinking about it, not so much from a Cornish perspective, but perhaps from a more of the history of technology perspective, is Thomas Newcomen was the guy who's considered to be the father of the atmospheric steam engine. And if you think about the atmosphere, I love this quote from William Rosen, and it's what was a historian of technology. He said, "The steam engine was the machine that changed everything, even the idea of invention itself." And if you think about it, you know, in the absence of steam engine, how do you get any work done? You get it with the labor, or you have to be near a stream with running water, or human labor or animal labor. Perhaps wind in certain locations, but when the steam engine was invented, it really freed up the ability to really have mass production and in the whole industrial age and what comes after the industrial age is really built on the steam engine. And this is a etching of what the first engine looked like. It's a three-story building. The President engine is also a three-story building, basically the same structure and design and appearance, larger of what Thomas Newcomen built. So if you think about it, this is probably the only place where Thomas Newcomen, if we could somehow bring him back, he could get within 100 feet of this building and he would look at it and he would know that's an engine house. And this is probably the only place in America where that could where that can be said that could happen. So I think beyond just the importance from a Cornish heritage perspective, I think there's a lot from a history of technology perspective. There's a very strong incentive to preserve this what remains of this engine. His first engine was built in a place called Dudley Castle Mines, and here's a photo on the right of Dudley Castle, and there's a picture of the President engine house, and you can take the middle of Dudley Castle, and you can see with Newcomen he needed a big strong building to support his equipment. Well, that's what we needed here with the President, and there's a great deal of similarities from that regard. So we're really executing a three-pronged plan now to remember the engine, to preserve it, and to provide access. To remember, we have what we've done is a lot of certainly media talks. We've been doing that, done a lot of research, and the historic marker, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But we also have a display at the National Museum of Industrial History. This is a model made by Tony Mont of Devon, England. We worked with Tony over 5 years to build this model, a scale model of the engine. And that's a main display at the National Museum. It's on the south side of Bethlehem. It's a Smithsonian affiliate. And when you walk down the main hall to go to the exhibition room, this is right in that main hall. It's a permanent exhibit. We also have a detailed sketch that was created by a fellow by the name of Alexander Carnes. He's a well-known engine rebuilder, steam engine rebuilder, and also a very talented graphic artist. And he built this a three-dimensional cutaway view of what the engine would have looked like in the engine house. We also have a movie that you can see it on YouTube that was created by Guy Jansen of Shell, Belgium. And he created a roughly 20-minute movie. Actually, there's a 30-minute version as well that basically allows you to take a look at the mine, get inside the engine, see it operate, even go inside the engine itself and see the technical details. That's available on YouTube. If you would type in President pumping engine, you'll find that. It's also on our website, our Friedensville Mines Heritage website. So that's remember, from a preserve perspective, we've done a lot of studies of the engine to understand what it would take to restore it, not restore the engine, but to restore the engine house, stabilize the ruins, make it so that it could be accessible. Those middle pictures here, these are all from a 3D scan, point cloud creation of the engine house. It's 760 million data points, and we can tell if a stone is moved by a 1/16 of an inch. So we've done construction drawings. We now have a constructability program going on. So we're doing a lot to figure out what it takes to really restore the ruins that are there. Then there's an opportunity for archaeology. We had a sinkhole open up about a year ago, and what we discovered in that is there's a whole network of underground tunnels which would have been associated with that 2020 boiler steam system. And because it was a sinkhole and for safety reasons, we had to fill it up within 24 hours. But there's a whole opportunity for archaeology which we hope to exploit. And then lastly, the whole purpose of remembering and preserving is certainly you want to then provide access. That's important. And so we have been working on studies about what a restored engine house would look like and how you might provide access. We have these renderings which what the engine house might look like if it were fully stabilized. You can see we have visions that you'd be able to go inside the engine house, stand on a platform, which would be roughly the same diameter as the cylinder itself in the same location. Walk around the outside. The pump pit is still there, so you can look down into the pump pit. And then we've also, as I said, part of our milestones here, we had a historical marker dedication event on November 20th. And this is a picture at the event here. We can see the horse-drawn carriage and the crowd on the right. And that's President Grant and President Webster, who was president of the Zinc Company, on the left. So what this was, we had a historical marker. I think every state has an historical marker program. In the case of Pennsylvania, ours are blue with gold trim. I think every state picks their own color and shape, but that's what ours look like. And we then had a dedication ceremony. As I said, what we did is we invited President Grant, Ulysses Grant, and as I said, Benjamin Webster, who was the president of the Zinc Company at the time that the engine was put into service. We invited them to come. Why did we invite President Grant? Well, it's long been a story that President Grant was invited to the ceremony to do the inauguration of the engine. And we've never found that in writing, by the way, but that's always been the legend, if you will. And even going back to writings at the time, you can see people calling it the President Grant engine. And in one of the documents that records the ceremony, it does have President Webster saying that he's naming the engine in honor of the chief magistrate of our country, who was President Grant in 1872. So we invited President Grant back along with Webster. We had a brass band playing 19th century patriotic music, speeches, of course, and President Grant and President Webster standing next to the engine. We had music playing. Did I come through for you guys?
No,
The music?
no.
Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'll have to work on that one. So, and then we also ran the model. The model runs on compressed air. So I know this will work. You can see the engine runs. See. And you can see a little figure there just to get a sense of how big the engine is. Figure. So then what we did is we went out to the engine house. As I said, the museum is about 4 miles from the engine house. It's in the center of South Bethlehem. Went out to the engine house. President Grant and Webster arrived in a horse and carriage. There they are. And what we did was we redid the inaugural of the engine address. This time we recreated history. We said, well, listen, we're going to do it now as if Grant could come, even though he didn't make it the first time. So we had President Webster give the speech that he gave at the time. We have that. That's recorded, so we know what that was. And then we had President Grant give a speech, an appropriate speech. He was running for a re-election at the time, so you can imagine how that went. And so he gave a speech, and then with the end of that, when during the original ceremony in 1872, when they would have said, okay, start the engine up. We obviously can't start the engine, it's not there anymore, but we did remove the historical marker sign, the cover on the historical marker. And then there was time for folks to look around, go up and see the engine. And then President Webster and President Grant left in their carriage the way they came, and that was the ceremony. We had a lot of fun, and a lot of attendance from various folks. We also got a recognition from the American Society of Mechanical Engineers at the event. We had one of the commissioners from the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission gave a speech. So it was a really good day. We were very lucky on the weather, which November, you never in Pennsylvania, never quite sure is, but we got lucky on that as well. So this is the what's on the sign, and there's a picture of the engine house with the sign in front. We had a local fabricator. It was their idea. I thought it was pretty clever, but he basically made a base for the sign that actually looks like the engine, right? Engine house, and we filled that with loose stone from around the engine and put a layer of bricks on top again from the property. And as I said, that's what's written there. And you can see Cornwall does get recognition, right? Lehigh, designed by Lehigh Zinc Company's Cornish-born engineer, John West. So we also will have a more detailed sign that will be hanging on the fence. It's over here. It will be, and I don't think it's quite hung yet. We're waiting for a nicer day to put it up, but it's ready to go. And we actually, if you have access to Pennsylvania Cable News TV, you can go on there in the history and culture section, and there's a 10-minute movie about the dedication ceremony, and I was really pleased with the job they did. They did a really nice job with it. So if you want to learn more, go to PCN TV and history and culture, and you can, as I said, pull up the movie there. And I got a lot of people to thank, but we'll move on and said that's pretty much an overview. So I'm open to questions, comments, and questions.
So the one question I have is how is all of this funded? Through
Well,
grants? And
yeah, I mean it's we now to get the actual engines stabilized is not funded today. We've been able to fund planning grants and the work we've done through grants. Lehigh University, who owns the property, has kicked in some money. Some other private individuals have kicked in some money. But we're waiting well, two things really have happened. We're waiting to get, and we're going to get that shortly, a sense of what it's going to cost to stabilize and repair the engine house. My guess is, Tom, it will be quite expensive.
I think so.
The pump shaft is still there, so you've got to figure out a way to restore this stone building with an open pump shaft. So the guys have come up with probably a pretty unique scaffolding scheme, but it will be expensive. We're not looking to bring it back to its original condition. We're really just looking to stabilize the stone structure that remains and make it so that people can go inside it. I mean, that's really the objective. But I think we're talking we're talking seven figure. We're into the seven figures for sure
Yep.
to do that. The other kind of complication at the moment is who owns the property. Lehigh owns the property, but the township would like to acquire the property for a heritage park. So there's a kind of an ongoing discussion now about who's the best owner for the property. I mean, obviously, I like Lehigh because they have deep pockets, but on the other hand, they're not really not really suited to operate if we want to turn this into a heritage park, they're not really the best position to do that. That's kind of not their mandate. So, so really, from that perspective, the township would be a better owner. The other thing, I think the township would be, they're probably a little better positioned to get a park going early so we can make it publicly accessible while we continue to work on restoring the engine house. I think there's probably some less expensive things we could do in the short run just to stabilize it, recognizing that a full restoration is going to take some time. But if the township owned it, we'd all be able to get more money than we are with Lehigh's ship. So that's a plus as well. So, a little long-winded there, Tom, but I guess
No,
if your question is, that's kind of where we're at.
that's kind of
So
always a question. Money, money.
yeah, always and I imagine that money will get a little tighter for the next couple of years anyway. But I do think, as I said, our kind of our little we're kind of stuck at the moment is who's going to own it, and
Um,
that's an ongoing discussion that's happening. So, any other questions? Uh,
Yeah, hey Mark. Curious how long and what kind of sparked your interest in the president, and any other Cornish areas that happen to be of interest too. And my cousin Bill, by the way, says hello. I was talking to him earlier this
Oh,
week about you. Yeah.
yeah, Bill has been a good supporter, and he's been a counsel as well to me. So say hi to Bill, and we correspond reasonably often. So, um, well, mining history obviously is interesting to me. The Cornish role in mines generally is interesting. Um, because of all the work that has to be done on this, I've had a fairly narrow and singular focus on trying to keep this moving along. Um, so uh, it, if I had a little more time, or not, it's not time, but I would love to do something with that small cemetery, which is the only surviving social example of Cornwall in Colesville. Apart from that, really nothing else exists. All little minor homes are all gone. So really, the only thing that remains is that cemetery. But as I said, got some resistance there from the owner of the property, as well as for the people who surround it. They're not, since it is the guy's backyard, he's a little reticent about having people traipsing through the yard to see the cemetery. So that's also a complication. But so how I got involved in this, it's um, when I was a when I was young, I we used to come down to Silicon Valley from Bethlehem frequently, and I was working in we take the Studebaker and to Silicon Valley area. And at the time, I can remember always driving by this building. And to me, as a little boy, 5-year-old boy, it looked just like a castle. And it really sparked my interest. And so, but, I had to work. I had to go to school, and then I had to go to work for 40 years. And I did a tiny bit of research on it, but, really didn't have the time to truly devote to it until I retired. And when I retired, in 2014, you know, took got a gun to the property, looked around, figured out that Lehigh University owned it from the no trespassing signs that I just trespassed on, and I figured out that Lehigh University owned it. I said, well, a university has to have some interest in academic pursuits and in inquiry, intellectual inquiry. I said, well, I got a shot here. It's better than a property developer who just wants to level it. So I really started to do intensive research. Had like a 20-page paper that I thought was pretty complete on why this building should be stabilized and repaired, and brought back to life, if you will. and shared that with the Lehigh contact. Fortunately, they were interested, and that what began as a 20-page paper is now 170. So there's been a lot of research subsequent, but that's how. I guess I can almost say it's a lifelong interest in this, just because it's and when you got to do. I don't know if any of you guys are retired yet. No, you all look too young, but you can't just sit around and do nothing, and I'm not inclined to be watching daytime TV much. So this is anyway. That's it. And then, I got interested. I'm not, don't kick me off the line, but I'm not Cornish. I'm 100% UK ancestry, but it's more like Yorkshire and the land of Scotland. But you can't help but get enraptured by the Cornish story once you get to understand, particularly in my case, particularly the involvement steam technology. I've always been involved in technological projects and things, but they're kind of seminal involvement in the whole development of steam engines, mining technology, and then he's just more broadly the very interesting culture. It's a Celtic culture that's quite a bit different than it has similarities and differences to the Irish and Welsh culture. So anyway, that's how I got interested. So somehow, first thing when they made me a bard, the first thing I said to the guy, because I wanted full disclosure, I said, I want you to know, I don't think I have a single drop of Cornish blood. And I don't even think I can claim any blood from Devon either, which is, kind of close, but no. And they said, that's okay. So I was,
We're
I was okay.
inclusive here, Mark. We're happy to have you. So thank you so much.
I was okay. I was okay with anyway. So I hope you guys enjoy the update.
Yes.
And
Any other
any other,
No, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yes,
no,
thank you.
it's my pleasure. I think I'm giving a talk to Penn State next week, and then the Lower Saucon Township Historical Society the week after that. Yeah, so I do try to get the word around, and it's that's part of this whole remembrance process. Is the more we can get the word around, the more people get interested. If you are interested, if you go on the website, Lehigh does have a preservation fund that we have going, and we are using that money as appropriate for the preservation of the engine house. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't put a plug in for that. You can, but it's if you go on the website www.friedensvilleminesHeritage.org, it won't take much. You'll find it. It's the website comes up pretty well. So anyway, well, listen, thank you.
Thank you
I'm gonna
very
go
much.